Hello, everybody. Welcome back to my channel, and thank you for joining me for another true crime video and another Jeffrey Epstein Files installment. And this one is a good one. It's very interesting, and there's a lot of information in here. A lot of names are about to be said. A lot of, maybe allegations are about to be suggested at. So there are moments in this story where Jeffrey Epstein's rise almost feels explainable, where you can point to money, timing, or opportunity, and at least begin to understand how he moved the way he did. Maybe sometimes he just got lucky. He was in the right place at the right time. Maybe someone didn't inspect his background or resume too closely. Maybe he was the right amount charming and manipulative to cut some corners. I mean, he kind of started getting into everything in the 80s. So back then there weren't computers, there weren't digital records, big time boys club. When he went to Bear Stearns, maybe they were just like, we like the cut of your jib, Jeffrey. You got a job here. But then there are moments we can also identify, right? Moments where the doors didn't just open for Jeffrey Epstein, they were opened for him by people who already had access to rooms most of the world will never even know exist. We ended this past Jeffrey Epstein installment by following one of those people, Lynn Forrester de Rothschild, a woman who didn't just move in elite circles, she helped define them. When we talk about all the areas of the world where money and importance exist, Lynn was there, all of them: business, finance, world politics, European royalty. And according to multiple accounts from multiple people, Lynn didn't just know Jeffrey Epstein. She brought him in. She introduced him. She was the conduit to people like Bill Clinton, Prince Andrew, Peter Mandelson, Bill Gates, and other powerful figures inside companies like Microsoft. These are connections that would go on to reshape Epstein's image and give him opportunities and access, even after everything he had done, that should have made him a pariah in these worlds, in all worlds. And when you start to look at how that happened, Lynn doesn't feel like an isolated connection. She feels like a piece of a gateway, because marrying into the Rothschild family didn't just elevate her status and give her access to European royalty and also access to banking and business. It tied Jeffrey Epstein, directly or indirectly, to one of the most powerful and historically influential financial dynasties in the world. And as we start pulling on that thread, it becomes clear that Lynn may not have been the beginning of Epstein's Rothschild's connections, and she certainly wasn't the end of them. So in this next installment, we're going to go deeper into those relationships, looking at other members of the Rothschild family, the introductions, the endorsements, the very close friendships, and the quiet ways that Epstein was allowed to exist in spaces that honestly he had no business being in, for many reasons. We have a lot to talk about today, and it's a wild ride. We're gonna have some fun with it, but before we dive in, let's have a word from the sponsor of today's video, Surfshark VPN. Something I think about a lot, probably more than the average person because of what I do, is how much information people put out into the world without even realizing it. And not just the big stuff. I mean, little things too, where you're logging in from, what sites you're visiting, what you're clicking on, it all adds up. And when you spend your time looking into cases where people take advantage of information like that, it kind of changes the way you look at your own online habits. And that's what actually made me start using Surfshark a long time ago. I've been using Surfshark for years. Surfshark is a VPN, which means it encrypts your data when you're online. So instead of your information just being exposed, it's basically turning it into something unreadable to anyone trying to intercept it. And I like that because it's one of those simple things you can do that just adds a layer of protection without really changing your routine, and it gives you peace of mind. And Surfshark VPN is very easy to use, which is important for me because I am technologically challenged. I don't have a lot of time to learn new things. I like a simple interface. If it feels like it's something complicated, I'm probably not going to do it or stick with it. And when it's something like Surfshark VPN, which is protecting me online, protecting my information, I want to stick with it. So with Surfshark VPN, like I said, super easy. You open it, you hit connect, and it automatically finds the fastest server for you. And that's it. It just runs in the background. There's also a lot of features that I find really useful. One is their email scam checker, which lets you check if an email address has been involved in data leaks or suspicious activity. And honestly, with how many weird emails people get these days pretending to be banks or delivery services or whatever, it's really nice to be able to double check things instead of just guessing and, hoping you're lucky. Another thing I like is that you can use Surfshark on unlimited devices with one subscription. So I don't have to think about that either. Not only my laptop, my phone, my computer, but my kids' PlayStations and Xboxes, their tablets, their computers, even my mom's computer. And my mom is in her 70s. She's very smart, but that is the prime age when hackers and scammers try to target people for whatever reason. So unlimited devices, I love it. Protect yourself, the people you care about, the people you love. And then there's the flexibility aspect because Surfshark has servers in over 100 countries, which means if something is restricted where you are or you're trying to access something from another region, you can just switch locations really easily. And that's cool for things like entertainment and media. So if you've ever gone on YouTube and seen a message that's like, oh, this video isn't available in your location, you just turn Surfshark on and you can watch it. If you are into watching, college basketball games like me, watch ESPN always blocks out games that are close to me for some reason. So if I like Syracuse University basketball, which I do, and I try to watch it on Watch ESPN, it's blacked out. But it won't be blacked out if I just switch my location with Surfshark VPN. They also have a strict no logs policy, which means they're not tracking or storing your browsing activity, which in my opinion is kind of the whole point. Privacy, keeping my private things from me. And I think for me, it just comes down to this. When you spend your time looking at how many things go wrong for people, you start to appreciate the small things you can do to protect yourself and the people you love before anything ever happens. So if you are looking for a VPN, Surfshark is the best out there, hands down. And if you want to check it out for yourself, you can go to surfshark.com/stephanieharlowe and use code stephanieharlowe at checkout to get 4 extra months of Surfshark VPN. Again, that's surfshark.com/stephanieharlowe. Use code stephanieharlowe at checkout to get 4 extra months of Surfshark. Thank you so much to Surfshark for sponsoring today's video, and let's dive in. Okay, to start unpacking all of this, we first have to really understand the Rothschild family, where they came from, and how much power and wealth they have accumulated, which, let's be honest, we don't even know how much wealth. There's no way to gauge that, honestly. But before we go any further, I do want to take a moment to set the tone for this part of the discussion. We're about to talk about the Rothschild family, and I'm sure many of you already know that name comes with a lot of baggage, a lot of mystique. There are countless theories, claims, and narratives floating around online, some of them dramatic, some of them sensational, and many of them repeated so often that they start to sound like fact. We don't know what is fact and what isn't fact amongst these many theories. But for the purposes of this video, I want to be very clear about how we're approaching this. We're not here to repeat internet rumors. We are not here to make sweeping claims about hidden control or secret power structures without proof. What we are going to do is focus only on what can be documented, verified, and reasonably supported by evidence. If there were connections, we'll talk about them. If there were interactions, we will look at them. But we're going to examine those connections carefully with context and without jumping to conclusions that go beyond what the facts actually show. We follow the evidence wherever it leads, and just as importantly, we recognize where it doesn't, or at least where we can't legally prove it leads. But you know how we roll here. We'll talk about stuff. So the Rothschild family is one of the most famous and notorious financial families in modern history. Their rise from a small banking operation in 18th century Germany to a network of powerful European banks helped shape the development of modern finance, government bonds, and international banking. So the dynasty began with Mayer Amschel Rothschild, born in 1744 in Frankfurt, Germany. He built a unique international banking system by using his family, basically. He sent his 5 sons to major European financial centers, and they established banks in Frankfurt, Germany, London, England, Paris, France, Vienna, Austria, and Naples, Italy. And this obviously gave them a huge advantage over everyone else in the game at the time. This was before railroads, before telegraphs, and so the fast exchange of information could dramatically change not only who made money in finance, but a lot of other things as well. So most bankers only had reliable information about their own city. They didn't have trusted networks in these other places because it was like, one bank is in Italy, one bank is in England, and those two banks are competitors. They don't have this open, free information sharing thing because they're not related to each other. They don't have loyalty to each other. But the Rothschild brothers trusted each other, and they worked together. And using their own network of private couriers, horse relays, and coded letters, they sent news to each other about war outcomes, government debt levels, commodity prices, and political stability in each region. So this gave them all this massive amount of information about all these different areas around Europe. Now, why is that important? Because bond prices would rise and fall depending on all of those factors. So if a banker knew that a war had been won before everyone else did, they could sell before prices collapsed or buy before prices rose. So we all know about Napoleon, who rose from a general to emperor of France and conquered much of Europe before he was taken down at the Battle of Waterloo. During the wars against Napoleon, Great Britain needed money. They needed money because they needed to not only pay their troops across Europe to keep them fighting Napoleon, but they needed to fund their allies like Austria and Prussia if they had a chance of defeating Napoleon's forces. So moving gold across borders at that time was risky for multiple reasons, right? It could be lost or stolen. If there's information that, a big amount of gold is being moved in the middle of the night, then they'll just get ganged up on and the wagon that's carrying the gold will get robbed. Lots of things could happen. Lots of risk being taken. So the Rothschilds stepped in to help the government using their family's network of banks in multiple countries. So Nathan in London called on his brothers in Paris, Frankfurt, Vienna, and Naples to get gold out of their banks to make the payments to everybody that needed to be paid. So in essence, their family bank could transfer funds way faster than any government could, way faster than anybody could. And the story goes that through the network of messengers and couriers, Nathan got word that Napoleon had been defeated at Waterloo a full 24 hours before the British government formally announced it. Therefore, knowing this insider information allowed him to make certain financial moves that greatly benefited the Rothschild family. Now, the Rothschilds' part in helping out Great Britain and their allies against Napoleon's devastating campaign also put the family in the good graces of the people who mattered in European politics at that time. After all of this, the Rothschild family became the most powerful banking network in Europe, and then they would go on to do a bunch of stuff, right? They were on the cutting edge of everything. They financed railways, major mining operations, infrastructure projects, and government debt. And as their wealth and power grew, so did their social status and influence. They were accepted into European high society. They were given noble titles. They were placed in aristocratic marriages close to political power and royalty. But here's the thing, marriage within the Rothschild family was very strategic. And throughout much of the 19th century, they kept it in the family, if you know what I mean. So historians estimate that more than half of Rothschild marriages in these early generations were between cousins. And this did a lot of things. This kept the wealth and financial secrets within the family. You could trust these people. They were loyal to you. They were your family. It's what a lot of royal dynasties have done throughout the ages as well. But James Mayer Rothschild of the Paris family branch married his niece, Betty, and their son, Edmund, he wasn't big on banking, but he did have other interests and passions. Edmund was a Zionist and one of the most aggressive early supporters of Jewish settlement in Palestine. He funded early agricultural settlements by paying for land purchases, infrastructure, farming development. And without that support, many of those early communities would probably have collapsed because at this stage, the Zionist movement was fragile. Many early settlements were failing, and his money and backing stabilized the movement and turned small settlements into lasting communities. Tens of millions of francs were spent by Edmund for this purpose, basically building the state of Israel. And when converting what amount that is into today's money, it equals hundreds of millions of dollars, maybe even over $1 billion. Now, not all the members of the Rothschild family agreed with Edmund's Zionist beliefs and what he was doing, and as you'll come to find, this is what's going to be kind of a breaking point in the family. Not just this, but disagreements that they have over what direction they should go in, what's important to them, et cetera, et cetera. So for this reason or that reason, many of the first 5 branches of the family sort of fell off. This left the British and the French branches existing into our modern times. So for our purposes today, we're going to focus on the French branch, stemming from James in Paris. But first, I want to talk about Ellie de Rothschild, who, remember, had told Les Wexner that Epstein had helped their family. Ellie, who died in 2007, was the great-grandson of James, and Ellie did a lot of things. He was the founder and former president of the Rothschild Bank in Zurich, Switzerland, but I want to just focus on a few things right now. So between 1996 and 2003, Ellie built an offshore empire in the Cook Islands. This is a complex network of at least 20 offshore trusts and 10 front companies, and many of the trusts had opaque names like Anon Trust, Banan Trust, and Dinan Trust. And those companies acted as trustees for one or more trusts, and the web was described as multi-layered and difficult to trace, but they all reportedly shared a common shareholder, Matalor Limited, based in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Now, we have to understand, this is what Epstein did too. And, we'll probably get into that eventually, but Epstein had a bunch of different trusts that didn't tie directly back to him, where he could move his money, hide his money, pay companies, get companies to pay him. And this money would sort of be not only hidden from anybody who wanted financial transparency, but also from the United States government. According to secret documents obtained by the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists, in at least one instance, the lawyer setting up trust was initially unwilling to disclose Rothschild's identity, describing him instead as the head of a wealthy and respected European family. Now, this happened when Portcullis TrustNet set up some of these trusts, and although they are normally required to have the grantor of the trust provide their full personal details and a deed of indemnity, in this instance, Portcullis arranged for the lawyer to sign for and on behalf of the grantor, which means that Ellie de Rothschild didn't even have to be present, really didn't have to have anything to do with this as far as identity-wise. Now, this was a Switzerland-based law firm, and this all came to light around 2013, so keep that timing in mind because it's going to be important later. The Swiss attorney was Peter Hefter, and his LLC was called Triton Limited in Rarotonga. This is an island somewhere in the middle of the South Pacific. The Cook Islands, by the way. So Microsoft's Nathan Myhrvold told Epstein that he was there in November of 2016. Just saying. I'm also saying the whole offshore trust concept was mirrored by Jeffrey Epstein throughout his life. So when you look at how did Jeffrey Epstein allegedly help Ellie de Rothschild's family, which is what Ellie told Les Wexner, that might make some more sense when you see new reporting that's come out in the past few weeks. Remember, we keep talking about how did Jeffrey Epstein make money? Who were his important clients? Because as far as we could tell, Les Wexner was really the only one, at least the only one we knew until recently. And then we found out about real estate tycoon Mortimer Zuckerman, who, by the way, is worth about $2.7 billion. So that's a billionaire client of Jeffrey Epstein. And according to the files, Jeffrey Epstein provided estate planning and possibly other financial services for Zuckerman, which is weird because Jeffrey Epstein was not a lawyer and he was not an accountant. So what the hell was he doing for Mortimer Zuckerman? And I think we're going to find out when we start talking about another billionaire client of Jeffrey Epstein's, which is Ariane de Rothschild, but that's going to come soon. So when you look at what could Jeffrey Epstein possibly have been doing to help Ellie de Rothschild's family, well, probably the same thing he was doing for Mortimer Zuckerman and for Ariane de Rothschild, which is, once again, really not financial planning, really not estate planning. It's more like helping them evade certain things and helping them have connections to the right people who can help them evade certain things and benefit in certain ways. It's more kind of like a mafia connection rather than a legitimate business connection. As far as I'm concerned, Jeffrey Epstein probably told these people, I'm willing to do whatever it takes for you, whatever you need. The things that your legitimate accountant won't do, the things that a legitimate lawyer won't do. I'm willing to do it or figure out how to do it or figure out somebody who can do it. Okay, so back to Ariane de Rothschild. Remember, I know I'm saying a lot of names, but Ariane de Rothschild was the gentleman who told Les Wexner that Epstein had helped his family out a lot, which is one of the main reasons Les Wexner decided to work with Epstein. Ariane de Rothschild was married to his childhood sweetheart, Baroness Lillian Fuld Springer. They got married in 1942. Lillian also came from an impressive lineage, founded by Beer Leon Fuld, a wine dealer's son from Lorraine, who moved to Paris in 1784 and established another successful banking business. Lillian's sister, Helene, was actually actress Helena Bonham Carter's maternal grandmother. Anyways, Ellie and Lillian, they're very much in love, okay? Great marriage, but Ellie wasn't so much in love that he didn't fall head over heels for Pamela Churchill when he was introduced to her in 1954. Pamela Churchill was Winston Churchill's daughter-in-law, but more than that, she was his trusted confidant. They were tight. So Pamela married Winston's son, Randolph Churchill, in 1939, but reportedly, with Winston Churchill's knowledge, Pamela conducted a series of affairs during wartime London so that she could basically pillow talk with diplomats and generals, becoming Winston Churchill's secret weapon in the fight against Nazi Germany. So in 1941, Averell Harriman came to London with a lot of money that Winston Churchill desperately needed, and a 21-year-old Pamela then had a sordid affair with a married Harriman who was more than twice her age. Described as the greatest courtesan of her era, Pamela's lovers include Edward R. Murrow, CBS broadcaster of This Is London, Major General Fred Anderson, a commander of the American bombing force, Colonel Jock Whitney, an intelligence officer with the OSS who would later become the U.S. ambassador to Britain, and Bill Paley, who was on the staff of General Dwight D. Eisenhower. She's having affairs and having sex with all of these men to get information and to pull influence for Winston Churchill. So after the war, divorced and free, Pamela became part of Paris society, where she continued having affairs with many rich men, including Prince Ali Khan, Gianna Agnelli, heir to the Ferrari empire, and Ariane de Rothschild. She was also one of Truman Capote's infamous swans. The swans were society's highest levels of beautiful women who relied on Capote as their confidant until he exposed their secrets for his own benefit. That little devil. Anyways, Ariane de Rothschild and Pamela Churchill, they had a long affair. They had a lot of fun. He arranged art history and winemaking courses for her. He compared her to a geisha, but apparently Allie's wife, Lillian, knew about this the whole time. According to the Duke of Windsor, at least, he was quite the gossip. You remember the Duke of Windsor. He was King of England for less than a year before he abdicated the throne because he was in love with Wallis Simpson, a divorced American woman, which was a scandal the royal family would not accept. They would not take Wallis Simpson as queen. So his abdication led way for his brother to take the throne and for the succession to fall to Queen Elizabeth, mother of Prince Andrew. So we have the Duke of Windsor to blame for that. Anyways, the Duke of Windsor and Wallis Simpson, once they're done with the royal family, they became society people. And reportedly, the Duke of Windsor had heard a rumor that Pamela Churchill was having an affair with a Rothschild. So he asked Lillian Rothschild, who is it? Who is Pamela having an affair with now? And reportedly, according to history, Lillian replied, quote, "My husband, sir." End quote. So apparently Lillian deliberately crashed her car into Pamela's one day, and I guess that made Pamela realize that Paris was done for her. So she moved to New York. She started an affair with Broadway producer Leyland Howard, who was responsible for The Sound of Music and married, by the way. But the day after Leyland's divorce was finalized, he married Pamela. Leyland died in March of 1971, and the day after his funeral, Pamela got back in touch with Averell Harriman, the rich businessman that she had an affair with when she was 21 years old, back in England, when Winston Churchill was like, go get close to that guy and get some of his money for me. At the time that she reunited with Averell, he was almost 80 years old. but still obviously very rich. They got married in September of 1971. Harriman was very involved in politics with the Democratic Party, and Pamela also got into politics. She would be appointed as the United States ambassador to France by Bill Clinton in 1993. And that was a wild ride. But you see, it's like all of these people belong to one family or one club that we're not allowed into. And we have to do all of this detective work and piecing things together and looking at different sources to even figure out that they have any connection. They all know each other. They all end up helping each other or working for each other. It's very interesting. So we also have someone named Annabelle Neilson, British socialite and model who first gained attention as the muse of fashion designer Alexander McQueen. She was born into a wealthy aristocratic family in London, and she also became the first wife of Nathan Rothschild of the English branch of the Rothschild family. So apparently Annabelle and Nathan were together for 4 years before they got married in November of 1995, but they were legally separated just 2 years later, and their divorce would be finalized in 1998. So not a super long marriage. We don't really know what that relationship was like, what happened in the marriage, why did they get divorced. Like I said, the world may never know because Annabelle signed a confidentiality agreement before receiving a substantial out-of-court settlement. We do have some context clues, however. We know they separated at Annabelle's request, and even though Annabelle never spoke about Nathan publicly, her mother did in 2008 when she told a journalist from the Daily Mail that her former son-in-law was a naughty boy who had sucked her daughter into a crazy life. So let's examine Nathan Rothschild's so-called crazy life. And I'm going to acknowledge that he has business dealings or had business dealings with Peter Mandelson. We're going to leave all of that out of this for now because we will come back to that at another time. It all ties in because they're kind of shady. Allegedly, don't come for me. But let's just look at Nathan's personal life and his alleged and not so alleged proclivities. Actually, we can talk about Mandelson real quick because the personal overlapped the business in many instances. In January of 2005, Lord Mandelson flew to Russia with Nathan Rothschild on Rothschild's private jet after meeting him at the World Economic Forum in Davos. They then went to Moscow, where Nathan allegedly set up a meeting between Mandelson, who was at that time the EU Trade Commissioner, and Russian oligarch Oleg Depreska, a billionaire who controlled Rusal. Rusal was a Russian aluminum company. There's a big scandal involved with that, okay? Once again, we have to come back to it, and I have it organized and slotted into another video. But after Moscow, Mandelson and Rothschild, along with Peter Monk, a Canadian gold magnate, and Sebastian Taylor, a friend of Nathan's, flew to a small Siberian town called Abakan, where Depreska happened to own a chalet and a smelting plant. In regards to the Moscow scandal that would later come out, Nathan had to testify, and he said that once in Siberia, he and his friends visited a banya, which is a traditional Russian sauna, and then they were beaten with birch twigs by a 25-year-old male banya keeper. In 2018, Nathan shared an article to Twitter about the rise in popularity of lifelike robotic sex dolls in Japan, and he wrote, quote, "When you make love to your wife, there can be some problems. With a doll, none of that matters," end quote. Well, I can kind of see maybe why the marriage ended. It also looks like Nathan, known as Nat by his friends, ran in the same circles as Jeffrey Epstein, having relationships with people like Eva Dubin and Jess Staley. Before he was making huge financial deals, Nathan Rothschild was considered the black sheep of the family. He was a regular on the party scene in Paris, London, and New York. He and Annabelle had eloped in Vegas against his family wishes. He was a playboy, an eternal college student, Van Wilder type that never took anything seriously. So maybe that was the crazy life Annabelle's mother was referring to. But Annabelle is not innocent in this. She's not innocent in any way, shape, or form because she emailed Jeffrey Epstein numerous times between 2010 and 2012. Her name also appears on the travel logs of the Lolita Express. In August of 2010, Ghislaine Maxwell had emailed Jeffrey Epstein, warning him to be careful of Annabelle, because as it turns out, Annabelle and Ghislaine had been friends for quite a while. I mean, of course they were. They both came from high society British families, and they were photographed together often in the 90s, you know, their little 90s girl socialite thing. It looks to me Like Annabelle was another one of these women who was working actively out in the world to gather other women to present to Epstein. So when you look at who was doing this stuff for him, and we think of somebody like Karina Shuliak, or we think of the other women that we've talked about over the course of these installments in this series, a lot of the women we talked about were usually like, okay, it's a girl in Russia and she needs money and she wants to be able to come over to the United States. And if I tell her to do these things for me and give me other women, then she will benefit somehow from that. But when you look at somebody like Annabelle Neilson, you have to wonder what was her motive for doing this for Jeffrey Epstein. She had her own influence. She had her own money. She was married to a Rothschild. You know she got money in that divorce settlement, especially because she signed a non-disclosure agreement. She had money. She had influence. She had a career of her own. She had a name of her own, a reputation. What did she stand to gain? And in that kind of scenario, I can only believe that it's because she wanted to do it, that she got some kind of kick out of it, that it was like an entertainment thing for her to provide girls for what she considered to be high-powered rich men like Jeffrey Epstein. So in September of 2010, she wrote an email to Jeffrey Epstein that said, quote, "Hi, Jeffrey. So I'm putting a little group of girls together. Hopefully one of them will have all the right qualities you desire. Wish I was 20 years younger and could speak French. I have to say that a few of my girls who would be perfect for the job, but are unfortunately past their sell-by date, would have all dropped their husbands and almost children for the job when I asked them. You know, I've just had a spark of genius while writing this. I think I may have the right girl. Can't wait to see you. I think I'm going to take you on a little studio adventure too. Not too long as I know you get bored easily. I have never thanked you for my stay properly, which is very naughty of me, but I hope we will all have some fun in London. I really did have a wonderful time with you. Thank you so much. Lots of love, Annabelle." So Annabelle could be talking about a lot of things here. I know that she was helping Jeffrey Epstein find an assistant, and that could be what she's talking about, but I don't really necessarily think so. And if that was the case, why would a sell-by date matter? I mean, reading this message again, she's talking about a few of my girls would be perfect for the job, but she says they're unfortunately past their sell-by date. And she says previous to that, I wish I was 20 years younger and could speak French. So in 2010, Annabelle Neilson was 41 years old. So she's saying she wishes she was 21 and could speak French. What kind of job was Epstein trying to fill? What kind of position was Epstein trying to fill that required a 21-year-old girl or woman who could speak French? And she's, basically saying he wants somebody very, very young. So I don't think she's referring to the assistant position job that she would later help him fill. She also says, I never thanked you for my stay properly, which is very naughty of me, but I hope you will have some fun in London, which to me suggests that maybe there was something more going on. Like, how would you thank him properly for his stay? Either she's having sex with him or she's providing somebody else to have sex with him. She's like, that's very naughty of me. And so it does kind of suggest that there was something intimate going on between Jeffrey Epstein and Annabelle. Now, we know that Annabelle Neilson was a model, so when she's referring to her girls, she could most likely be talking about fellow models and socialites. Annabelle also went on to write children's books. I know that was a weird transition. In 2010, she modeled in Naomi Campbell's Fashion for Relief fundraiser in aid of White Ribbon Alliance Haiti, and Naomi Campbell introduced her to Nelson Mandela's Children Fund. So outwardly, Annabelle is presenting the face of someone who cares about women and children. But these emails to Jeffrey Epstein do not reflect that same alleged care. And I think that's just another example of how we see people present a public face of like, oh, I'm so, protect all women and protect the children, and I care about people and I do charity things. But really, they're just kind of like shitty people in general. And they're part of this world where like revelry and excess is just a normal part of their everyday lives. So it's very hard to imagine how those two things can go together cohesively or in harmony, because they don't. So at the end of September, Epstein wrote to Annabelle, sincerely thanking her for all her help that day. She wrote back, quote, "Sincere thank you for being a good friend. It was fun to have something to find you that you really needed. Anyways, question, if I need to, can I come back and stay with you in Paris? Would you mind? Thanks for having me last night. Not in that way. Big kiss, miss you, Annabelle," end quote. In 2012, Annabelle said she was off to Paris, and Epstein asked her if she had any cute friends there. She suggested someone named Davina, to which Epstein replied, "She's Eduardo's." And Annabelle said, quote, "Oh yes, so she is. If I think of anyone suitable, I will let you know," end quote. See, like I said, she's setting him up with women, young women, to have sexual relationships with, because every time he goes to a different city, he's messaging another woman he knows in that city, usually a woman, not a man, and saying like, "Hey, do you have any friends that you can hook me up with while I'm here? Do you have any friends I can have sex with while I'm in this city?" And there's women in every city he has who are basically like pimps for him, and they're like, yeah, let me pull together some of my girls. They're madams, okay? It also looks like Annabelle Neilson was helping Jeffrey Epstein find an assistant. He emailed her asking for a heads up on potential names and times, and she wrote back, quote, "So Lady Alexandra Spencer Churchill, she will be coming at 5:30 p.m. Khalada Al-Swati at 6 p.m., then Kelly Eastwood at 6:30 p.m. Unfortunately, Lady Louisa Compton is still in Hong Kong, but I'm hoping at least to have a CV, and you can always meet her at another time, or I can send her to you. There is one other girl. Her name is Laner Marla. I unfortunately can only get her here by tomorrow, as I have her flying in to meet you. Will you be here tomorrow? Otherwise, I will cancel her," end quote. So CV is like a resume, by the way. So she's saying, this seems like a legitimate business transaction at this point. Epstein's actually looking for an assistant, but I think it's an assistant as in Leslie, his assistant, right? And the women that he had running his emails, and how he kind of made Karina Shuliak eventually an assistant. So what we need to know about Annabelle is she had dated Lord Edward Spencer Churchill, the Duke of Marlborough, meaning he's related to both the Churchill family, as in Winston Churchill, and the Spencer family, from which Princess Diana belonged to. The Lady Alexandra Elizabeth Spencer Churchill is the Duke of Marlborough's sister. So we are having all of these connections that are coming together, because Annabelle previously married to Rothschild, then she was dating the Duke of Marlborough, and now she's trying to get his sister, who is a descendant of both Princess Diana and Winston Churchill, to work as Epstein's assistant, because that's what that kind of lineage demands. Epstein then asked Annabelle, quote, "Anything cute for after?" end quote. And Annabelle replies, quote, "Cute as in a cuddly toy, or cute as in badly behaved English girls? There is a little thing for my very young friend who is launching her bikini range at Morton's, but that might just drive you mad. I have a friend I might call. The problem with English girls is they do seem to go a bit mad, but not in the right way, if you know what I mean," end quote. My very young friend who's launching her bikini range at Morton's? My very young friend? Unfortunately, Annabelle can't comment on her extremely close relationship with Jeffrey Epstein or her extremely controversial words, because at the age of 49, she was found dead in her home in Chelsea on July 12, 2018. Nathan Rothschild's birthday. So police at the time stated it was not suspicious, and her family later said it was a heart attack. Annabelle died on a Thursday night, but the following Saturday, her Instagram account was active. Apparently, the account posted a picture of a man in a pool, and the caption read, quote, "Fatties get in first," end quote. So friends who had just seen Annabelle at the Duke of Marlborough's wedding commented that she had seemed distracted. And later in the day, when the posthumous Instagram post went live, someone went on Annabelle's account and removed a number of darker posts, including what was described as a severe black and white selfie with the caption, "My current state of mind." Now, after Annabelle's death, a source close to her said that she had a lot of private pain that she kept from others. A friend of Annabelle's, Caroline Stanberry, said that Annabelle was always slightly a tortured soul. And you might look at that and say, okay, well, maybe she was broken. Maybe she had mental health issues. Maybe she had, something has happened to her in her marriage to Nathan Rothschild, or something's happened to her in life. And that's kind of why she was so easily manipulated by Jeffrey Epstein. But once again, we kind of have to stop giving these women who worked for him and with him excuses as to, they were all manipulated. Not that he wasn't very manipulative, not that he wasn't very good at it, but at some point when you're literally throwing other women to the wolves, you have to start, maybe not giving them so much wiggle room. But we have yet to get to Epstein's most shocking and close Rothschild relationship, the one that would blur the lines between everything. Ariane de Rothschild and Jeffrey Epstein corresponded consistently over the course of 5 years. They arranged meetings at each other's homes. They had a professional relationship, but also a very personal one. And eventually, Ariane de Rothschild would pay Epstein $25 million for consulting. This is all very important because this money was in exchange for help that Epstein provided the Rothschilds, who were being investigated by the DOJ for tax evasion. Basically, the Rothschilds, along with other Swiss banks, were being looked into for helping super wealthy people hide their money from the IRS, among other things. So Ariane goes to her friend Jeffrey Epstein. He goes to his friend and former senior White House lawyer Kathy Rumler, and they all jointly come up with a deal where the Rothschilds get off easy and Epstein and Kathy benefit financially, extremely. And there's other stuff, too. There's evidence that Jeffrey Epstein was using certain well-known intelligence tactics to get close to these people, like Ariane de Rothschild, the same way a CIA or Mossad agent would groom an asset. And we're going to go over the emails, the timelines, the accusations, the paper trail that shows how all of these figures were and probably still are working behind our backs, not just to get sweetheart legal deals for themselves and others, but how they pull strings in international affairs and how their fingers were jammed into every single pie from country to country, from private sector to the public sector, everything. So since the DOJ released more of the Epstein files this past March, Ariane de Rothschild has been getting a lot of heat. And that is because Ariane de Rothschild is objectively and inarguably one of the most powerful figures in modern private banking. And she's the CEO of Edmond de Rothschild Group, a major financial institution focused on private banking, asset management, and investment services. So Ariane isn't just a figurehead of that company, that group. She's widely been recognized as a hands-on executive who helped reshape the Edmond de Rothschild Group, which is important because she became CEO in 2015, and her relationship with Jeffrey Epstein began around 2013 and continued on until at least 2019. This would be the exact time frame in which Ariane would have been doing all of that hands-on reshaping while actively taking business and personal advice from a convicted sex offender. Now, we know that some of the Epstein files had been released previously, and Ariane's name kind of came up, the Rothschild Bank came up, and in response to that, the bank claimed in 2023 that Ariane had only met Epstein as part of her normal duties. Ariane herself said that she'd asked for Epstein's advice on a couple of occasions. Well, then these DOJ files dropped a few months back, and she had to come back out and clarify or admit that their relationship actually went much deeper. But she also wants all of us to know that she was unaware of his criminal conduct. Ariane de Rothschild said, quote, "I say this without any ambiguity. As a mother, as a CEO, and as a shareholder, these acts are of extreme gravity, and I condemn them in the strongest possible terms." End quote. She maintains that she had no idea, and she discovered the reality and extent of the crimes at the same time the general public did. So let's go over the timeline because it's spicy and it's very revealing. I think the most revealing relationship Epstein had that shows us exactly how he operated and exactly how he groomed his targets, just like an intelligence agent would, and how proficient he was at it. And you have to wonder, as his Russian female friend did in the first installment of this, was Epstein born that way? Did he make himself that way? Or was he taught these skills? Did somebody teach him to be a master manipulator, to be able to form bonds and connections with anybody once he had identified their weak points and their pain points and their vulnerabilities? So in June of 2013, Ariane de Rothschild is mentioned in emails between Jeffrey Epstein and someone named Olivier Coulomb, who is a very important person in this context and overall. So between 2007 and 2012, the president of France was Nicolas Sarkozy, and Olivier Coulomb served as Sarkozy's diplomatic advisor. Before that, Coulomb, who's a Frenchman, had been temporarily assigned from the French government to work inside the office of Tony Blair, the UK prime minister, in 2005 and 2006. His resume says that he was a diplomat with extensive experience of African affairs, which basically means he likely worked on France's relationships with African governments, on things like diplomatic negotiations, political strategy. I'm telling you, it probably means that because it's hard to find out information about him now. It's pretty difficult to find out like specific information about specifically what he did. It's also mentioned that Olivier Coulomb had helped reform development aid, which would include managing or shaping foreign aid programs and deciding how funds were distributed while working with international organizations. So in 2012, when Nicolas Sarkozy was no longer president, Coulomb was actually positioned for an ambassadorship in South Africa, Madagascar, or Argentina. But for some reason, instead of doing that, he decided to take a job with the Swiss financial group Ariane de Rothschild. So this is where Ariane comes in. She was actually born in El Salvador. Her father was a German national who had been a senior executive at a company called Hoechst. This is important, I think. And we will have our talk about Monsanto and the history of all that and how just a handful of people control our food production and distribution, and you'll hear about Hoechst again. But she completed a lot of her education in France. She got her MBA from Pace University in New York in the late 80s. After graduation, Ariane worked at AIG, a finance and insurance corporation in New York, where she met one of their clients, Benjamin Rothschild, in 1993. And I guess it was love at first sight. Ariane and Benjamin got married in 1999. They would go on to have 4 daughters together. So by the time she met Jeffrey Epstein, Ariane was already married to a Rothschild, a pretty important one. She had already joined the family business. She had taken on management of their lifestyle assets. She had already joined their supervisory board. And in 2009, she was appointed vice president. Now, Benjamin had taken over as chairman of the bank, the head of the bank, after the death of his father, Edmund, in 1997. But then in 2015, Benjamin had to step down due to a very bad heroin addiction, and his wife, Ariane, took his place, becoming the most powerful person at the Ariane de Rothschild Group, with a fortune at her disposal worth roughly $5 billion, probably more. So let's go back to our previous conversation about how intelligence agencies groom assets. They do this using an acronym, SADRAT, S-A-D-R-A-T, Spot, Assess, Develop, Recruit, Run, and Terminate. And we will run these tactics alongside how Jeffrey Epstein built his relationship with Ariane de Rothschild and others. So spotting is when intelligence agents identify individuals with access to valuable information, like diplomats, scientists, military officials, powerful people who know a lot and have access to a lot and could potentially be sort of manipulated and won over. Now, Epstein was already in touch with Olivier Coulomb, who in 2013 was now working for Ariane de Rothschild. How did Jeffrey Epstein know Olivier Coulomb? Well, through another well-known diplomat, Terry Rode Larsen of Norway. So Rod Larsen has a long history and an extensive resume, and we will talk about it because he and his wife, Monica, are now being investigated in Norway for their ties to Jeffrey Epstein. But for a long time, he was considered like a super good guy. Let me try to condense what he means to this, what he's done in the world, so we can move on with this specific story because we'll come back to Terry Rode Larsen. But we aren't talking about some minor figure here. This is someone who was deeply embedded in global diplomacy at the highest levels. Terry Rode Larsen was a Norwegian diplomat and political figure who played a central role in one of the most significant peace efforts of the modern era. In the early 1990s, while working with the FAFO Institute, the FAFO Institute, he conducted research in the Middle East that put him in direct contact with key players on both sides of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Those connections became the foundation for what would turn into the Oslo Accords, the first official agreements between Israel and the the Palestine Liberation Organization, PLO. Because of that, Terry Rode Larson quickly rose onto the world stage. He was appointed as a special advisor to the Norwegian government on the Middle East peace process, and then moved into the United Nations as an Under-Secretary General, where he continued working at the Center of International Diplomacy, allegedly. Allegedly, that's what he was working on. He would go on to hold multiple high-level positions, including briefly serving in Norway's government and later leading the International Peace Institute in New York. This is an organization closely connected to the United Nations and global policy circles. So when we talk about Terry Rode Larson, we're not talking about someone on the outside looking in, or just some random. We're talking about someone who helped shape major international negotiations and had access to world leaders, governments, global institutions, information for decades. Now, his wife, Mona Juul, was also a significant figure in her own right. A Norwegian diplomat, she worked for the Norwegian Ministry of Foreign Affairs. She was directly involved in the back-channel negotiations that led to the Oslo Accords. In fact, she played a key role in facilitating the secret meetings between Israeli and Palestinian representatives. She went on to have a long and influential diplomatic career, serving in senior roles, including Norway's ambassador to Israel and later to Jordan and Iraq. Which, does that feel like a conflict of interest? I don't know, but eventually she would represent Norway at the United Nations. So this wasn't just one well-connected, well-informed individual. Terry Rode Larson and Mona Juul operated as a highly influential diplomatic pair, both deeply embedded in international politics and peace negotiations. The couple visited Epstein's Island in 2011 with their 2 children. Documents show that Jeffrey Epstein loaned Terry Rode Larson $130,000 in 2013. Epstein also left each of Terry and Mona's children $5 million in his will. And in 2017, Terry Rode Larson was listed as an executor of Epstein's estate, although this was later edited and he claims he didn't know he was listed as an executor. Additionally, investigations by Norwegian broadcaster NRK show how Terry Rode Larson used his position as president of the IPI, the Peace Institute, to help Epstein. Terry wrote official letters of recommendation to U.S. authorities to secure visas for young Russian women that Jeffrey Epstein knew. Terry, claimed that these women should be brought to the United States because they possessed extraordinary abilities suitable for research roles. But these women were just actually models with no academic background who were allegedly trafficked and abused by Jeffrey Epstein, which Terry Rode Larson claims he knew nothing about. Now, Palestine, rightly, is questioning whether the Oslo Accords were rigged, with Mustafa Barghouti, the General Secretary of the Palestinian National Initiative, saying, quote, "We never felt comfortable with this person from the very first moment. Oslo was a trap, and I have no doubt that Terry Rode Larson was being effectively influenced by the Israeli side all along." End quote. Now, this is all due to Jeffrey Epstein's alleged ties to Israel, which we will discuss further. But it's worth noting that at the same time Epstein is communicating with Ariane de Rothschild, Olivier Colomb, and Terry Rode Larson, he was also close to and communicating with Ehud Barak, who served as Israel's prime minister from 1999 to 2001, later serving as their defense minister. Barak had known Epstein since 2003. He continued his relationship with Epstein after his conviction in 2009 and up until his 2019 arrest. And like Terry Rode Larson, Barak's wife was close to Epstein as well. And there also seems to be an exchange of money happening from Epstein to Barak. So, yes, it looks like there was some conflict of interest. And Epstein will eventually introduce Ariane de Rothschild to Barak. And basically, he would tell the man, hey, if you want to get anything done, if you want money for anything, you've got to go through Ariane de Rothschild. So the documents show that Jeffrey Epstein facilitated a partnership between Barak and Ariane de Rothschild. And this was with the aim to finance Israeli technology sectors, including cybersecurity and biotech. So we have leaked emails that show Epstein advised Barack on how to approach Ariane de Rothschild. In a 2013 email to Jeffrey Epstein, Barack asked for advice on how to build a relationship with Ariane, stating, quote, "I'm ready, but I need your advice on how. Ladies is your forte," end quote. Ew. So understand what Palestine is saying at this point when it comes to the Oslo Accords is, hey, we see that the guy, Terry Rod Larson, who basically helped, put these peace deals together, who is super tight and super close to Israel's Ehud Barak, right? Who at the time that he's talking to Jeffrey Epstein and being introduced to Ariane de Rothschild, he is Israel's defense minister from 2007 to 2013. And so with Terry Rod Larson being sort of like, I'm supposed to be unbiased, and obviously Barack is not at all unbiased, and all of these other indications lead to Jeffrey Epstein kind of being, having the best interest of Israel at heart, or at least having his best interests and using people that are associated with Israel for his best interests. At the end of the day, Palestine is now saying, hey, we don't trust these peace deals. And in fact, we think that none of you care about what happens with us. All you guys care about is doing what's best for you, and you have already made deals with Israel, and you're already kind of bought and paid for by Israel, and everything that you pretend to do that's supposed to be to help us or to help make peace is just not in our benefit, and it's not to help us, and nothing ever sticks. So yeah, obviously Palestine, when they found out about Terry Rod Larson's connections to Epstein and Epstein's connections to Israel, they were like, hey, we don't like how this is looking, and I guess they're investigating it now. So when it comes to spotting potential assets, Jeffrey Epstein was a professional, obviously. He knows so many people, and really important people, once again. And then he would use those people to introduce him to other potential assets and important people. Okay, so in 2011, Terry Rod Larson told Jeffrey Epstein that he should connect with someone named Olivier Colomb, who he described as a close advisor of Sarko, which is Nicolas Sarkozy, the president of France. Now, reportedly at that time, Jeffrey Epstein had been trying to get close to top officials in France, and he had been using another connection of his, Boris Nikolic, to try and set a meeting with Consuelo Remert, who was the half-sister of Carla Bruni, wife of Nicolas Sarkozy, the president of France. So Boris had introduced Consuelo to Epstein. So at that time, Boris, he was the chief advisor to the Bill Gates Foundation, and he was Consuela's point of contact on development aid. And he introduced Consuela to Jeffrey Epstein. Boris Nikolic is also a biotech venture capitalist who was named as a backup executor in Epstein's final will. In 2019, a spokesperson for Boris said that he and Epstein had no business ties, and he was shocked that he was named as an executor in the will. That was in 2019, remember, before all of these files were released in 2026. And of course, no surprise, Boris Nikolic wasn't completely honest. I don't know why these people thought this stuff was never going to come out. Because at that point, it's better to not say anything, If you know there's a potential, possibility that your connection and your actual relationship with somebody who is not looking good on the world stage is going to eventually come out, just don't say anything. Don't be like, we never had a relationship. I never liked that guy. All right, I always knew there was something off with him. And then all the stuff comes out and you look like a hypocrite. But I think it's just another really strong example of how stupid they all think we are. This dude, Boris Nikolic, all over the Epstein files. Boris is sending Epstein cute little emails, quote, at Soho House, it is fun, wish you were here, B. Like some Gossip Girl level foolery. Epstein asked Boris how it went with Bill yesterday, Bill Gates. And he said that he and Met just walked in a park and it was dark and 0 degrees. And Boris said, quote, did she keep you warm and safe? Winky face. In Oslo or Paris, all is well. We'll tell you more. End quote. Yes, Boris is just shocked that Epstein felt they were close enough to name him in his will, even though they are talking constantly, and they're sending cute little bromance emails back and forth. And who is Met, right? Because Jeffrey Epstein says, yeah, I'm just walking in the park with Met. Well, that's Met Merritt, the crown princess of Norway. They were close too, Jeffrey Epstein and Met. We will talk about that. Trust me. Anyways, Boris is trying to help Epstein get in with top government officials in France, but it's not working until 2011 when good old Terry Rod Larson brings together Epstein and Olivier Colomb. So in June of 2013, Epstein emails Colomb and says, quote, I'm interested in meeting anyone you think I would enjoy, end quote. Because he's spotting for potential assets. Colomb writes back, quote, I'm having lunch with an old friend of mine and also a good friend of Terry's, Terry Rod Larson. He is the French ambassador to New York, to the UN, and despite his title, he is a very vivid and enjoyable chap. Otherwise, I can find you other people, end quote. Epstein's reply is very telling because, some French ambassador, like, who wants to talk to that guy? Epstein's got 25 ambassadors in his pocket. I guess a French ambassador might have potential, but Epstein has his sights set higher. He says, quote, I can meet with Ariane, Sarkozy, Putin, as long as it's interesting, end quote. He's like, I can meet with the head of the biggest bank in the world. I can meet with the French president. I can meet with Putin, the Russian president, as long as they're interesting and they have something to offer me. What a weirdo. So the next day, Olivier Colomb emails Epstein and asks if he would be free to have lunch with Ariane de Rothschild on Friday at noon. Now, at this time, Epstein's in Paris, and Olivier tells him that the lunch will be at the Edmond de Rothschild Bank, and he gives the address. He says it's a stone's throw away from the Elysee Palace. All right, so now Epstein and Ariane have their first in-person meeting, and this is when Epstein conducts the second letter in the acronym, the SADRAT acronym, A. Assess. This is where the agent will determine their target's vulnerabilities, motivations, and possible willingness to provide information or benefit. So Epstein and Ariane de Rothschild, they have lunch. To be a fly on that wall and see the way it went, I can only dream, because that's not possible. But after the lunch, Jeffrey Epstein writes up a letter, and the letter's intended for Ariane de Rothschild, but he doesn't send it to her. He sends it to Terry Rod Larson and Olivier Colomb to see what they think about it. Okay, so he writes up this letter and he's like, I'm going to send this to Ariane. What do you guys think? Like, you think it sounds good? You think she's going to like it? And Terry Rod Larson is like, yeah, this looks great. I can give this to Ariane if you like. And Epstein was like, no, it has to come from me, right? He was just trying to get the feedback before he sent it, which shows you, Epstein acts like he's got it all under control. He's so confident. But in the end, he still goes to his little bro group to make sure that a letter he's sending a girl sounds good. So the letter starts off, quote, it was a treat to have lunch. Your kindness was greatly appreciated. I thought I'd return the kindness by providing you my thoughts on our conversation. These thoughts are tailored, less like your bed sheets, but more like a bath towel. More warm, encompassing, and hopefully functional, end quote. The secondhand embarrassment is real with this one, okay? He's doing too much. He's trying too hard. Epstein then mentions sharing some experiences that he's had with past clients, that these past clients found beneficial. So he's posing himself as someone who has a legitimate and credible past with other people of Ariane de Rothschild's caliber. And then he says, quote, that being said, I owe a significant debt to Edmond. His principles have guided my business for 30 years, end quote. So Epstein's referring to Edmond de Rothschild, the namesake of the bank, Edmond de Rothschild Group, and Ariane's father-in-law, who had passed away in November of 1997. So maybe some people get confused. I'm not talking about Ellie de Rothschild, who told Lex Luthor, what's his name? It's Lex Luthor. Les Wexner, that Epstein had helped his family. I'm talking about Edmond de Rothschild, who is Benjamin de Rothschild's father. So Ariane's related to him by marriage. And now Epstein is saying, listen, I have a connection to your late father-in-law. So Epstein already did the assessing during his lunch with Ariane. And now he's moved on to the third letter in the SADRAT acronym, D for develop, which is the core grooming phase. An intelligence agent will build rapport and trust during this phase, usually by offering friendship, professional respect, or support in an early attempt to make the relationship feel natural and free from pressure. So early on, Epstein invokes the name of Edmund de Rothschild, framing Edmund as a guiding influence on his own life and career, like a mentor. He presents himself as someone who respected Edmund, someone who learned from him, even someone who feels a kind of personal debt. And then from that position, he offers help. What that does is create an immediate sense of connection and credibility. It lowers defenses. It reframes the interaction as something rooted in shared history and mutual respect and family, which is important to the Rothschilds, rather than a cold introduction. This pattern will be repeated throughout Epstein's interactions with Ariane. I don't want anything from you. I'm just here to help you. I care about you. I care about your family. I can be a trusted source of support and assistance when you need it. Now, Epstein does this with Karina Shuliak as well, but in a different way. With Karina, it was more aggressive. He would push back. He would be demeaning when he felt he needed to be, to put her back in her place, to keep her kind of insecure and guessing. But with Ariane, he's going to be more gentle, more fatherly almost. He's not interested in having a romantic connection with Ariane. He's interested in becoming kind of like a family to her, right? He's not trying to get her to see him in a way where she feels beneath him, so she feels indebted to him and he's giving her things and she needs to repay him with her body. She is going to look at him as somebody who is an older gentleman who learned from her father-in-law, who just is appearing as if the universe sent him to pick up the torch where Edmund left off and to be a constant, strong presence in her life. So during the lunch, Ariane has clearly shared with Epstein some of her pain points, not personally yet, I don't think, but professionally. And here is Jeffrey Epstein to offer Ariane advice and solutions, not in exchange for a fee, not yet, but out of the goodness of his heart because he cares and he's looking out for her. He tells Ariane that modern banking institutions are like biological systems because they are complex and you can't fix one problem without affecting other parts. He says that mixing finance and philanthropy is a suboptimal situation. It weakens the effectiveness of both. He tells her, focus on being the banker to the world leaders. Return to the Rothschild roots, the role that the Rothschilds have historically played throughout time. Now, in these emails to Ariane, we see Epstein speak and communicate in a very different way than we have before, because before he's been dealing with people who he felt were beneath him, people who he had already built something of a transactional relationship with him or who were indebted to him. And with those people, he's usually short, often crass, sarcastic, superior acting, not with Ariane de Rothschild. With her, he is humble, articulate, writing with intention, and I believe with the goal of sounding at her class level, not just intellectually, but with manners, like I'm fancy too. I have deep thoughts too. In other emails with other people, he's spelling words wrong. He's not using punctuation. At the end of all his emails, it says sorry for the typos as a default email signature because he knows that it's just, I don't know if he can't spell, if he just doesn't care to take the time to type it out properly. I don't know, but he's not great grammar, not great sentence structure, misspelled words for days. But here he is to Ariane de Rothschild writing in full sentences using proper punctuation and all these like similes, like not tailored like your bed sheets, tailored like a warm, cozy towel that you can use after a hot shower on an autumn day. Even when he's attempting to signal that he is smart and someone who can be of help to Ariane, he does so in a very humble and polite way. He ends the email saying, quote, "As you are already aware, I, like you, speak my mind and try to be direct so as to not have any misunderstandings. When I am next in Europe, if you think you might find it interesting and fun, I am more than happy to spend more time describing health as it relates to financial institutions combined with diets and financial nutrition." End quote. Now, in stark contrast, Epstein is communicating with Olivier Coulomb in separate emails around the same time. Epstein emailed Olivier to say, quote, on my island in the Caribbean with an aquarium full of girls, end quote. Olivier Colomb responds back, quote, the king of Saudi Arabia has a few white sharks at his palace. I totally prefer yours. Sure, I would enjoy the view as long as you don't have any hammerhead ones. I like white sharks, end quote. I don't know if you're picking up on it, but Olivier's not talking about sharks. He's talking about female women. So Epstein writes back, quote, as to our Russian, I guess some might refer to them as white sharks, end quote. He also tells Olivier Colomb that some are like shrimp. You throw away the head and keep the body. And Colomb writes back, quote, I like shrimp, but not so much if it's too pink, although I'm definitely more into white than any other color. I like your philosophy, end quote. Epstein's response was, quote, I can't even think of the smell of black shrimp. Ugh, end quote. Now, it's difficult to find information on whether or not Olivier Colomb was married at this time. I think he was, because in other emails, he does talk to Epstein about trying to find a place to go on holiday with his family. He talks about being in a chateau that he found to be boring, but the kids were enjoying it. He sounds like a man who has a whole ass family while he's talking like this. But anyways, Epstein and Colomb are also talking about business stuff and networking stuff. In this same conversation, Epstein has a friend he'd like Colomb to meet, a friend who built the Beijing airport. Colomb says he would be happy to look into it with Epstein's Chinese friend and said, quote, otherwise hope your shrimps are still consumable, end quote. Epstein writes back, quote, of course, fresh, no fish smell, end quote. So by June 20th, Ariane was writing back to Epstein, quote, thank you much for sharing your thoughts with me. I truly appreciate it, as you well know how few people do so and have the courage of their opinions. Please let me know when you next come to Paris and we'll continue our discussions with a good bottle of Bordeaux, end quote. Now, Epstein writes back, suggesting that Ariane see a specific movie called Being There. For some reason, he really wants Ariane to see this movie. He's talking to Terry Rod Larson and Olivier Colomb also about like, we should tell Ariane about this movie. Like, she needs to watch it. I think he's trying to once again influence her and impact her. And Epstein asks if Ariane would be interested in sharing a dinner with Woody Allen and his wife when Epstein is back in Paris, because Woody is filming in France and will be staying with Epstein. He then asks her if she has any plans for New York or the Caribbean. Quote, as I see it, you are in the brand business. First, let's discuss you having your glass of wine, me, chocolate milk, end quote. I guess Jeffrey Epstein didn't drink alcohol, or at least he pretended not to, because I think he felt it made him seem more above it all. And I also think he wanted to keep his wits about him and not slip up around people. But yes, he's well known for not drinking alcohol, but the whole like, I'll have chocolate milk, like, it just seems a little much, like he's just really trying to put forward this pure, like, schoolboy, I'm so innocent I could never hurt you, Ariane kind of image. Now, Ariane de Rothschild writes back and says she would love to have his thoughts about the brands. She said she will be in Paris the 10th through the 12th of July, and will Epstein be there then? She invites him over to dinner at her house, and she tells him he can bring guests or not, his choice. He replies back, quote, sounds good. At least definitely New York, as from September 15th, many world leaders will be there for the opening of UN General Assembly. I should know my Paris schedule by the end of the week. Some throat clearing first. I would greatly prefer to have a one-on-one, as my counsel is extremely private, sometimes sharp, but only really helpful if I am able to ask the real questions and share my uncensored but thoughtful ideas that will be held in strict confidence. I've described it in the past as a health checkup, albeit a financial one, unless, of course, you normally bring other people into the examining room when visiting with your private physician, end quote. Basically, Epstein's saying he wants to meet with Ariane privately, no guests, and he likens their relationship to a doctor-patient privilege kind of thing. He also acts like he has to check his schedule for Paris because he's so busy and he's so important. He's like, let me check my schedule, Ariane de Rothschild, see if I have time for you. But then he's immediately emailing Olivier Colomb, telling him he's considering going to Paris the week of July 8th when Ariane said she'd be there. And he's like, Ariane says she's free. Is there anyone else you think would be interesting for me to meet? Sarkozy, etc. He's still trying to get a connection to Nicolas Sarkozy. So on June 27th, Epstein emailed Ariane, quote, can we have a 30 to 45-minute call in the next few days at your convenience? I would like to get some of your preliminary thoughts so as to make mine more useful to you. My travel remains up in the air until the middle of next week. Many exciting things, end quote. By July 1st, Ariane de Rothschild and Epstein are still regularly talking, and he suggests some people Ariane should meet. Ehud Barak, Bill Gates, Larry Summers. who, by the way, I just found out has a big connection to Mark Zuckerberg. But Larry Summers, okay? Saul Werman. So Ariane writes when she has availability to meet these people. She also says that she was already supposed to meet Bill Gates 2 weeks prior, but she had to leave earlier than expected. And then she says, okay, back to the brand. Now, she's referring to the Rothschild family and their name. This is the main subject that she and Epstein have been talking about because the whole dynasty, the whole Rothschild dynasty that started out so solid and so strong, has weakened and cracked over the decades. Different branches of the family have had different fallings out. They've gone their own ways. They disagreed about things. And this really seems to have started in the 1970s with Jacob Rothschild and his cousin Evelyn. So remember, in modern times, the branches of the family that survived were the British and the French branches. And these two branches have pretty much always worked together harmoniously, at least publicly. But we know how families go. The British branch had some different opinions as initially both Jacob and Evelyn began their careers at the family's London-based bank, N.M. Rothschild and Sons. And in the 70s, Jacob started pushing for expanding the bank's services, taking a more aggressive approach to finance, while Evelyn wanted to maintain the status quo, and he feared that rapid expansion might lead to a loss of family control. So Jacob eventually proposed a merger with another bank, and his own father, Victor, along with his cousin Evelyn, were vehemently against it, and this led to Jacob leaving the family bank and taking control of Rothschild Investment Trust, an entity he had become chairman of in 1971 while he was still with the family bank. So immediately following Jacob's resignation, Evelyn started making a big deal about Jacob using the Rothschild name. Evelyn said, listen, my cousin can't just put Rothschild on everything. Yes, it's his last name, but the name is a brand. And this name and this brand belongs exclusively to the family's core banking business. Evelyn said he was concerned and worried that if Jacob used the name for his own independent investment firm, it could not only cause market confusion, but depending on what Jacob went on to do, it could potentially damage the name, hence damaging the brand, hence harming everybody who was associated with the core banking business. So Evelyn and Jacob's dad, Victor, they pressured Jacob to remove the name from his company, and Jacob eventually did, as he knew the only other choice was being involved in drawn-out legal battles that he probably wouldn't win, but he was not happy about it. And at the time that Jeffrey Epstein and Ariane de Rothschild are discussing the brand, this rift about the name is still very active and still very much causing issues within the Rothschild family, issues that had made their way over to the French branch. So there was Rothschild & Co., led by David de Rothschild, who had partnered up with Evelyn, which is Jacob's cousin, and Evelyn appointed David as deputy chairman of the London-based N.M. Rothschilds and Sons in 1992. In 2003, when Evelyn retired, David took over the whole group, which then fell under the umbrella of Rothschild & Co. Then there was Edmund de Rothschild, Ariane's father-in-law, who was running the Edmund de Rothschild group that focused on different things than N.M. Rothschild & Co. did. Edmund de Rothschild group was more into private banking, asset management, wealth management, etc. And ironically enough, now it was Edmund's side of the French branch, aka Benjamin and Ariane, who were mad about their cousin David using the name Rothschild. So this name is so important to these people. And you see in these emails, this was never anything that was publicly happening. You never would have known. But because we see into these emails, we now have really insight into how much this family was fighting over the name. And there were legal battles that were public, but you just didn't really know how kind of personal they took it, which is funny because Ariane, who is so concerned about this name, she would be the one who ended up, I think, harming it the most by her affiliation with Jeffrey Epstein. It's Ariane who, through her relationship with Epstein, harmed the Rothschild brand more than anyone ever could or ever has, honestly. So Jeffrey Epstein is giving Ariane de Rothschild advice about this, and he says, quote, Edmund was right, down market. I think he said David's son is weak. A good thing, nice, but weak. Needs more thought, merger with the right terms and conditions for certain products, buyback provisions, etc. Edmund told me he would buy or sell anything at a price, as long as it was on his terms. I've used that extensively. Did I miss anything except to wish you a good trip? End quote. First of all, why does Jeffrey Epstein speak like Yoda in some emails? But we don't know if Edmund de Rothschild ever told Jeffrey Epstein anything. We don't even actually know if they knew each other or if Epstein is just pretending that he knew Edmund, and he's now delivering Edmund-style advice to Ariane and Benjamin from behind the grave. We know he knew Ellie de Rothschild because Ellie de Rothschild told Les Wexner, that he did know him. But as far as knowing Edmund de Rothschild, he could be completely full of shit. And with Jeffrey Epstein, you just never know, which is the fun part about him. So when Epstein's referring to David's son, he's talking about Alexander, who apparently, according to Jeffrey Epstein, Edmund said was weak. Ariane writes back, quote, "To get back to the brand, yes, there is confusion, and there are, I think, only two ways: merge/buyout or work on strong differentiation. The problem with the merger is what each side considers its worth, and also David's deep conviction that they are the only true Rothschilds allowed to do banking, and therefore I should merge with them and become a passive shareholder. I do agree that Edmund's group has a lesser notoriety, one, because large M&A deals were sexier and attracted more press, two, Edmund always felt that it was somewhat downgrading to talk about his bank. Three, as I told you, we had to be silent for the past 15 years. End quote. Okay, so the name and the brand thing clearly been an issue for some time. Ariane also tells Epstein in another email that she might buy the cousins out one day, and she looks forward to discussing it with Epstein. He wrote back, quote, "We might decide to make an offer. It would shock David. I think you will need to show strength. Not sure how that translates into action points, but David smells weakness. Give up on the name issue in exchange for X. I fear you are not on strong grounds, and he will take a loss there as a crack in the wall. I'm always available by phone or Skype. I will not be able to come to Paris until September. Gather your thoughts, and we can have another phone chat when you return from a hopefully successful Greek trip." End quote. We might decide to make an offer. So it sounds like Epstein's placing himself not only on Ariane's side, but kind of as part of her business and possibly even family. Like he's Edmund de Rothschild resurrected, right? Which is what I told you I think he wanted to do. He was trying to kind of make that connection and sort of like slide in, not just as a friend, not just a business associate, but like somebody Ariane would look at as family. So the next day, Ariane told Epstein that David was cannibalizing the brand. And Epstein writes back that he's gone over David's financials, which are, quote, "more footnotes than numbers, makes no money, a lot of heat with a small amount of light." End quote. First of all, how does Epstein have David's financials? Understand this name and brand thing has been a pain point for the Rothschild family for a long time, and Ariane de Rothschild is actively discussing this with Jeffrey Epstein, who she has known by this point for a very short time. The original Rothschilds would be rolling in their grave for Ariane to be giving information about the family and talking shit about the family to an outsider like this. So it seems that Jeffrey Epstein has become, in Ariane's mind, a trusted confidant and someone she can turn to in times of confusion in a very short time. How does Jeffrey Epstein have David Rothschild's financials? And he's like, yeah, these financials, they don't seem to have any substance. He's not looking at these. He's sending them to people. You can see in the emails, check these financials out, tell me what you think. But he's making her think that he's looking at them and he's giving like his expertise on what he's seeing. It's so crazy. So on July 5th, Ariane de Rothschild emailed Epstein, thanking him for his ideas, his questions, and his time, and saying, quote, "Thank you also for being here when I have so many doubts," end quote. Okay, we're going to take a quick trip to the future. We will be back to this Epstein-Ariane de Rothschild timeline, but fast forward a few years to 2015, when Benjamin and Ariane took legal action against Rothschild & Co., then headed by Alexander, accusing their relatives of causing confusion by using the Rothschild name. Leading up to the public announcement of this legal action, Ariane is often and openly discussing it with Jeffrey Epstein. They're talking about how much the name can be valued, if there's potential for royalties, legal strategy. He's making suggestions, connecting with other people who can help. Did Jeffrey Epstein influence the eventual legal battle over the Rothschild name? He certainly acted as a strong counsel, one of the singular counsels for Ariane in the years leading up to it. So much influence for someone who doesn't actually have any legitimate background in this kind of stuff. So Machiavellian of him. All this help, all this advice, all the support, and wanting nothing in return, at least not yet. Epstein is going to go years before he asks for his payday from Ariane de Rothschild. So in September of 2013, Epstein tells Ariane, quote, "So there is no misunderstanding. I am a friend always first. I view my role as an advisor to provide my best advice, no restrictions. I am neither politically sensitive nor correct. That being said, after making my points, backed by experience or advocacy, should you choose to go a different way, I will help as best I can. As a mathematician, many times after working on a formula for months nonstop, it turns out that on page 203 I made an error. There is no emotional reaction. It just means I made an error. Start again. End quote. So wise. So wise. And it wasn't just professional advice and support that Jeffrey Epstein offered. He and Ariane got personal. It appears that Ariane invited Jeffrey Epstein to her home for dinner, and in attendance was Ariane's mother and at least one of her daughters. Ariane and Benjamin have 4 daughters. They've understandably kept information about their children very private, including their ages. However, we do have approximate age ranges, and in 2013, the 4 daughters would have all been under the age of 13 years old, with the youngest being approximately 4 to 6 years old. On October 13th, 2013, Jeffrey Epstein emailed Ariane de Rothschild saying, quote, "Dinner was a treat. Nice meeting your mother and daughter," end quote. Ariane replied, quote, "Thank you so much. It was great having you at home. And really, thank you for challenging me as too few do," end quote. So back to the way intelligence agencies and agents groom assets. SADRAT, the acronym. Epstein has already done the S part, the spotting. He's already done the A part, assessing, to determine Ariane's vulnerabilities, motivations, what she wants, what she needs. And now, like I said, he's in the D part, develop, the grooming phase, where he's building rapport and trust by offering friendship and getting close to Ariane's family. And he has identified something that Ariane and many other powerful and rich people have expressed feeling, that they are feeling isolated and alone. They're surrounded by yes men. Most people who want to be better and be the best, they rely on honest reactions from others to calibrate themselves. But at a certain level of success, that feedback loop changes. And then the people around them, employees, business partners, even social connections like friends, they often have something to gain by staying in that person's orbit. And when access becomes valuable, honesty becomes risky. Like, basically, when someone gets to a high position of power or wealth, the people around them are saying, hey, I benefit from this person in some way. I am getting to go on trips. I'm getting a job. I'm getting, money or just social status by being around this person. So if I push back and tell them they're doing something wrong and they get mad at me and then they ostracize me or they, ghost me, then I'm going to lose out on all this stuff I'm getting, all this access I'm getting by being close to this person. So I'm just going to basically kiss their ass and tell them that everything they think is right and everything they do is right. So I don't risk my position in their life, right? Because it's not necessarily that Ariane would tell people to get away from her if they challenged her. But the way these people are thinking is it's like someone can't be mad at you for telling them they're amazing in every way. There's no chance I could lose access if I just keep telling her she's amazing in every way, because logically she can't just be like, get away from me. You're too nice to me. But there is a small chance if I push back that I could lose my position here. So Ariane de Rothschild is saying she hasn't really felt that she's been challenged. She's agreed with. She's praised frequently. She's shielded from criticism. And over time, that creates a kind of informational isolation. It's not that Ariane didn't want the truth or that she was incapable of hearing it, but so few people were willing to give it to her because they didn't want to risk the way they were benefiting from having access to her. It is lonely at the top. And that's where someone like Jeffrey Epstein could become psychologically valuable to someone like Ariane de Rothschild, and emotionally valuable, not because of who he actually was morally, but because of who he pretended to be, how he presented himself once he sensed this loneliness and isolation, once he picked up on the fact that Ariane was starved for authenticity and honesty. He cultivated an image of himself with Ariane of being intellectually provocative, a disruptor, willing to challenge ideas, unafraid to question people and the status quo. For someone used to constant agreement, that can feel refreshing, even grounding and safe. It creates the impression of authenticity of someone who isn't playing the game, even though Epstein was playing the game. He was just playing at a higher level than others in Ariane de Rothschild's orbit. Jeffrey Epstein wrote back to Ariane a long email full of information and advice that stressed it was her and her family that he cared about. Quote, I have been ruminating a great deal on last night's conversations, my thoughts. You have fully accepted the complex responsibility for Benjamin, the girls, and the continuation of the family heritage. The most important responsibility, however, I would suggest, needs to be to yourself. For the good of the rest, you are required to be healthy, physically and mentally, balanced, strong, but measured and flexible. Maybe a 2 to 3 day physical, a full one, new machines, fast heart scans, full body with no radiation, etc. Then a program, a regimen that will use your pit bull determination to follow. Keeping Ariane healthy, first priority. Regarding your estate, over the next few weeks I will send you some reading and a list of thought-provoking questions. These will be on the unique problems of transferring high-profile family wealth, updated versions of what Edmund was best at. Over the years, new twists and opportunities have been born. I believe the questions might help initiate new ideas. Actually, I'm certain of it. I like giving, but I love giving back. As only a small partial repayment for the invaluable advice that I received from your father-in-law, I would be happy to sit with you. Then, if you want, you and Benjamin, you and the girls, Michelle included if you choose, not as a teacher, but in order to share some of my experiences on the subject. If the past is any guide, the all-hands family meetings have been remembered more than most other events in a young person's life. Example, some of your daughters will need protection from the masses. Some will need protection from your cousins. Some will need protection from their partners, and some will need protection from themselves. This email, as well as all our conversations, I view as highly personal and confidential, end quote. So Epstein's, suddenly a champion of women. He's like, your daughters are going to need protection from that crazy world out there, right? Your own family members, their inevitable men that they meet and marry, they'll need protection from these people. And I want to help you protect them. Once again, now that Epstein has been allowed into the inner sanctum of a person, a woman specifically, her home and her family, he has identified that to Ariane de Rothschild, these things are very important: home, family, her daughters. But he's also speaking to something deeper within a high-powered CEO who also happens to be a woman. You take care of everything and everyone. You're running an enormous business and cleaning up messes there. You're also a mother and a wife when you go home, and you face a whole different set of expectations and responsibilities. Your husband is kind of, a mess. He's got an addiction. He couldn't even handle running the business. You had to take that over. And now you have to make sure everything's good with him, and he's going to his treatments and he's getting better, and you have to worry about your daughters and your mother and the business and the company, and you got to worry about your cousins coming after you because of the name thing, and you have to go from hard and professional to soft and maternal at a moment's notice. You are pouring from your cup, but it's empty, and who's replenishing it? None of this works without you, Ariane. And if you aren't being taken care of, and if your cup is not full, everything else falls down. Everything else falls apart. And do you know how much women like Ariane de Rothschild feel this? And how validating it feels to hear someone say it? To see that they recognized it without having to be told? Do we believe that Jeffrey Epstein was this intuitive and kind man who was able to pick up on these things in the women around him and care about them? Not for his own benefit, but because he genuinely cared about the women in his life. No, he picks up on it. But it's not because of genuine care. It's because he's been trained, I believe, to pick up on these things, to recognize these very subtle things. So he can earn trust, and he can create an illusion of care and safety. So he can answer problems for Ariane that nobody's even asked about before, right? Nobody's even asked her if she had problems before. And now Jeffrey Epstein is telling her he sees that she has problems, and she didn't need to tell him. He just knows her so well. On October 14th, Olivier Colum sent an email to Jeffrey Epstein. Quote, "What did you do to Ariane?" Smiley face, end quote. Epstein responded back with one word, quote, "listened," end quote. Listened. And just like that, Jeffrey Epstein has solved the question of what women want. He listened to Ariane. He paid attention. He heard what was on her mind, how the weight of the world was on her shoulders. He recognized that although she's a huge deal, a massively powered, intensely wealthy individual, she's also a woman, and she wants to be heard, and she wants to be seen, and she wants to be understood, and she wants to be cared for. He listened. That's it. Olivier's like, man, you got, Ariane wrapped around your finger. What the hell did you do to her? Smiley face. Epstein's like, I listened to her. That's it. So a few days later, Olivia Colum emailed Epstein again, quote, "We had fun with Ariane this week. She talked every day about you and the advice you gave her last Sunday, by the way, and her mom likes you as well," end quote. By that point, Ariane de Rothschild was hopelessly smitten, Twitter-pated with Jeffrey Epstein, not in a romantic way, but in a, I can breathe around this person. He understands me. He gives me advice to help me, and he tells me what I need to hear. He cares about me, and that is so rare in my life right now. I cannot lose this person. That kind of way. So as time goes on, Ariane talks to Epstein about everything, from business dealings with the rest of the Rothschild family to personal family matters. In October of 2018, she wrote, quote, "Had a horrible week. Went through my father's funeral between Istanbul, Geneva, and Germany. I am sad. Eve has had her knee operation, went well, but can't walk, and my brother was taken urgently to the hospital. Extremely weak, has been losing a lot of blood from multiple ulcers. Plus the bank, thank God, and Benjamin, who is back and requires a lot of patience. Worst week. I will leave next week for Mozambique to spend time alone. I will be in New York from the 6th to the 9th of November for the Amdocs board. Will you be there? Are you okay?" End quote. Now, Epstein doesn't respond with what he has going on or whether or not he's doing okay. He simply replies, quote, "I'm there when you need me," end quote. Now, Epstein's also sending gifts to Ariane's daughters. He's planning salon appointments for Ariane. He's having his driver transport her there. She's talking to Epstein about her own husband and the trials and tribulations with Benjamin and his issues. And Epstein refers to Benjamin de Rothschild as mentally ill in an email to Kathy Rumler. Now, there's a name we remember from previous Epstein installments, right? Kathy Rumler, another one of Epstein's friends in high places. Let me give you a quick recap with some added context because, of course, Kathy comes into play here. Catherine Rumler is a high-profile American attorney who rose to prominence when she served as a federal prosecutor in the Department of Justice and worked on one of the largest corporate fraud cases in U.S. history, Enron. Kathy helped prosecute executives and unravel a massive financial scandal, which most likely helped her secure the position of White House counsel under President Barack Obama, a role that placed her at the center of U.S. political and legal decision-making. So after leaving the White House, Kathy transitioned into the public sector, joining Latham and Watkins, where she served as the global chair of the White Collar Defense and Investigations Practice. So that means part of her job was representing individuals or companies being investigated by the government for financial wrongdoing. But remember, when she worked for the U.S. government, she was investigating corporate fraud. She built cases against executives who were committing corporate fraud and helped prosecute wrongdoing. And apparently, this seems like it would be a conflict of interest, right? Because obviously, who wouldn't want a lawyer to work for them who knows the inner workings of how the U.S. government builds cases against these kinds of corporations and people? If you're a person or a corporation being prosecuted by the government, wouldn't you want somebody who worked for the government prosecuting other people because they know stuff and they know people in the DOJ and all throughout that whole kind of web, that interconnected web of law and order and government? Okay, right? We're going to talk about that. There's something called a revolving door policy for government officials that's supposed to sort of prevent them from doing this. But Kathy would eventually end up joining Goldman Sachs in 2020. She became global head of regulatory affairs and eventually chief legal counsel. So I want to shout out another creator who I found. I really like her. I like her style, her method of delivery. She seems really smart. I think we would be friends. Her name is Carly P. Riley. She made a video about Epstein's Rothschild connections. And in that video, I learned something that absolutely made sense. So Carly informed us in her video that there is a statute in the U.S. Criminal Code. I think it's 207, and it imposes a 2-year restriction on former or very senior executive branch personnel. So basically, it's a federal law that restricts what former government employees can do after they leave the government, and it's often described as a revolving door law, and it's meant to prevent people from using insider knowledge or influence that they had and they got when they worked for the government for their own personal gain. So, like, if someone learned about a bunch of stuff in their high-level government job, like when they were the top lawyer for the president of the United States, they can't use all that information or the contacts they made to benefit themselves when they transition into the private sector, like a top-level lawyer at Goldman Sachs, or a lawyer who's supposed to be helping corporations who are being prosecuted by the United States government into either not being prosecuted or like getting a deal where they can get out of it with as little blowback as possible. So this code is saying for 2 years after leaving public office, if you were a very senior executive branch member, you can't use your insider advantage in the private sector for your own personal financial gain. Now, Kathy Rumler stepped down from her position as White House chief counsel on June 2nd, 2014. And Jeffrey Epstein made an introduction between Kathy Rumler and Ariane de Rothschild in September of 2014. By this time, shit was already going down with the Rothschild family, as we know, with like the name thing. But legally, there were also issues developing with tax evasion. Because for decades, Swiss banks like Edmond de Rothschild Group were known for strict banking secrecy laws, protecting client identities and attracting wealthy clients from around the world. Basically, if you had a lot of money and you didn't really want anyone to know you had a lot of money, and you didn't really want to pay taxes on that money, you would be entrusting it with a Swiss bank because they would help you avoid people knowing you had money, especially the government. But then the U.S. government began aggressively targeting the Swiss banking system after uncovering widespread tax evasion by U.S. citizens who were using offshore accounts. This led to the Swiss bank program, where banks were basically told, hey, we can investigate you and we can prove that you're doing something wrong, and we will, but we're going to give you the opportunity to just admit you're doing something wrong and then pay penalties to avoid criminal prosecution. And then, please, could you stop doing those wrong things? And a lot of Swiss banks took them up on this. But on September 12, 2014, Ariane de Rothschild wrote to Kathy Rumler, quote, "Dear Kathy, thank you so much for taking the time to come yesterday. I was very happy to meet you and hope that we will be able to work together in the very near future," end quote. Kathy Rumler replied back, quote, "I very much enjoyed meeting you and it would be my privilege to help you in any way," end quote. So, as I said, Edmond de Rothschild Group was one of the Swiss banks caught in the net of the United States Swiss bank program. They admitted to assisting U.S. taxpayers in hiding assets and income from the IRS by concealing these assets in offshore entities in places like Panama and the British Virgin Islands. Additionally, they admitted to providing their clients with credit or debit cards that allowed them to access this money without leaving a direct paper trail. It's pretty complex. So the bank agreed to cooperate with the Department of Justice. The Edmond de Rothschild Group was like, yeah, we will cooperate, we'll admit to wrongdoing, and then we'll pay you a fine. So really the only thing at that point that was in question was how much was the penalty that they were going to pay. It was announced in December of 2015 that the Edmond de Rothschild Group was entering into a non-prosecutorial agreement with the Department of Justice, and who was running point on this deal with the DOJ on behalf of Ariane de Rothschild and her bank? Katherine Rumler, and of course, Jeffrey Epstein. So there's an email from July of 2015, and the person that Epstein is talking to is redacted, but given context clues, it's highly likely, in my opinion, and just, if you have two brain cells to rub together, that the person he's talking to is Kathy Rumler. So he says, quote, "Went through with Ariane. Fee issues. Complicated. No free cash. What do you think of the following? Ariane pays Southern Trust, my company, equal sign based on final settlement with DOJ. Payment between 150 to 200, 5 million. 100 to 150, 10 million. Under 100, 25 million. Do you see any legal issues?" End quote. So Epstein's saying that Ariane is going to pay him because of whatever help he provided in the DOJ settlement. And if the settlement that the DOJ makes the Edmond de Rothschild Group pay is between 150 to 200 million, Epstein's going to get 5 million. If it's between 100 million to 150 million, then Epstein's going to get 10 million. And if somehow he can make it so that the Edmond de Rothschild Group is paying under 100 million to the Department of Justice, he will get 25 million as a fee to his Southern Trust company. So in December of 2015, Epstein was emailing with Ariane, and they're talking about the proposed settlement from the DOJ, a settlement that Kathy Rumler and another lawyer were negotiating for the Edmond de Rothschild Group with the DOJ. So Ariane asks, 45 million? Epstein replied, quote, "I think you will find that 45.5 penalty, legal, Kathy plus Pillsbury around 10, me 25, all less than 80, pretty good," end quote. He's saying, hey, you're getting out of this paying less than 80 million. 45 to the U.S. government, 25 to me, and 10 to the lawyers, Kathy and whoever this Pillsbury person is, probably a lawyer that worked with Kathy. So Kathy's making pretty good money off of this deal. He's saying this is a really good deal, and in fact, as it turns out, it was. Now, understand, over 80 Swiss banks had come forward during the Swiss bank program, admitted misconduct, and paid penalties to avoid prosecution. USB paid $780 million. Credit Suisse paid $2.6 billion. Julius Baer paid $547 million. Zürcher Kantonal Bank paid $99 million. Bank Leumi paid $400 million. HSBC Private Suisse paid $192 million. On and on and on. Huge settlements. Edmund de Rothschild Group settled for $45 million with the help of Kathy Rummler, who worked for the White House and the government at the highest levels for many years. And all because Ariane de Rothschild knew Jeffrey Epstein, who knew Kathy Rummler so well, she called him Uncle Jeffrey. Now, there's a reason why Epstein was making $25 million in this deal. He's making more than Kathy, the lawyer who's actually making the deal happen, because his involvement in it was essential, because he brought in Kathy, who had connections to people at the highest level of government, and she was able to negotiate a sweetheart deal for Ariane de Rothschild and her bank, just one of the many sweetheart deals we have seen circulating around Jeffrey Epstein, including his own with the U.S. government in 2009. Now, should Kathy Rummler have even been allowed to negotiate a deal with the U.S. government while she was doing her work in the private sector? Wouldn't U.S. Code 207 prevent her from doing that? I mean, just in general, if her work with the U.S. government was this kind of stuff, going after corporations for misdeeds, wouldn't she know not only like details of how there can be loopholes and how there can be things you can kind of get away with, but also know people who owed her favors, or because she was friends with them would be like, yeah, we're getting billions of dollars from all these banks. We can give Edmund de Rothschild Group a little break since, it's you, Kathy, it's you. Or would U.S. Code 207 even apply to Kathy? Because there might be a loophole, as Carly P. Riley points out in her video. She says that there are terms in the statute, including a definition for what a very senior member means. And one of those terms is that a very senior employee would have to make over $181,500 a year. But when Kathy Rummler left the White House, working as chief White House counsel, Obama's head lawyer, she was making $172,200 a year, roughly $9,000 under that threshold for her to apply for that statute. And Kathy was one of the highest paid staffers in the executive branch, even though she was the lawyer of the president. And none of them, all of these people, a lot of people working in the executive branch of the government at that time were not making salaries that would constitute them as a very senior member of the executive branch, which is weird because if you're Obama's lawyer and it's like your job to protect the lawyer and the White House and stuff from, any legal issues, you think you'd be considered a very senior member of the White House. But Carly, in her video, she says she's not trying to say this is intentional, but she also says maybe it kind of seems intentional. She says, quote, "The salaries were set specifically with the intention of evading this kind of rule to allow these people to leave office and immediately go into the private sector and do whatever work they want and make their $10 million representing a foreign bank and a foreign national against the DOJ and getting less of a slap on the wrist for the fact that you're allowing wealthy Americans to not pay their taxes, all while you are doing it alongside a convicted sex offender," end quote. Now, according to a senior executive at Edmund de Rothschild Group, reported by Le Monde, quote, "At first, the U.S. authorities wanted $80 million. Thanks to Catherine Rummler, that bill was cut in half. After that, Epstein became much more prominent in the group. Everything seemed more or less subject to his strategic thinking," end quote. So that this person, who's a senior official at Edmund de Rothschild Group, told Le Monde the U.S. government was trying to get $90 million, but then thanks to Kathy, they cut that bill in half. And then after this, because of Epstein's influence and relationship to Kathy, and he brought her in to help Ariane de Rothschild and the Rothschild Group, because of that, he was now super important with the Rothschild family, super important with Ariane. And then everything seemed to be revolving around what he was thinking and what he wanted. But why thanks to Kathy Rummler? What did she have that any other lawyer didn't have, besides contacts at the White House and the Department of Justice? So as of mid-February of 2026, Kathy Rummler has resigned from Goldman Sachs in the wake of the DOJ release of the Epstein files. The New York Times says, quote, Ms. Rummler and representatives for Goldman said for years that she had a strictly professional relationship with Mr. Epstein, a convicted sex offender, but emails, text messages, and photographs released late last month upended that narrative, leading to Ms. Rummler's sudden resignation, which surprised many at the firm, end quote. These files revealed that Kathy educated Epstein on how the law differentiates between underage victims of sex crimes and adult prostitutes. She wrote to him in 2015, quote, I think the point is that if she was underage, she could not legally consent to engaging in prostitution, end quote. She also offered advice on how to knock down the credibility of one of his accusers, writing in an email that Epstein's lawyer could push the woman into a perjury trap. So she's not, so she's not for the victims, so to speak. The New York Times article goes on to say, quote, Miss Rummler signed some emails, XOXO, and swapped photos. She joked with Mr. Epstein about the weight of visitors at New Jersey rest stops and speculated about the sexual orientation of a well-known hedge fund billionaire. And over a series of meetings, she sought his advice on personal and professional matters. Men aren't interested in women my age, one email lamented. In 2019, while interviewing for the job at Goldman, Miss Rummler told Mr. Epstein that she was wearing gifts from him. Am totally tricked out by Uncle Jeffrey today, she wrote, end quote. Ugh, I'm grossed out. Tricked out by Uncle Jeffrey? Ugh. Although both Kathy and Goldman Sachs have claimed that Epstein was never her client, it doesn't appear that way because in 2018, Kathy helped Epstein edit a legal document that was defending his 2008 agreement to plead guilty to soliciting prostitution from a minor. She's helping him with legal stuff constantly, but don't worry. Good old Kathy Rummler will always land on her feet. She might have resigned from a hugely financially profitable position with Goldman Sachs, but she did make a ton of money during her time at Goldman, and her options in the company's stock are due to vest over the next 2 years. She's expected to collect about $80 million. It's almost like she put in a few years of work with the government to get the expertise and the connections so that she could be extra valuable to companies that defend the same kind of companies and people that she went after when she worked for the government. And then she just kind of waited and did her time with the government so she could make her millions afterwards using all of that information that, I don't know, once again, it's like, it doesn't feel right. I'm sure it's legal, right? I'm sure she made sure it was legal. She is a brilliant lawyer. Thanks to Kathy, the Ariane de Rothschild's group bill was cut in half for the U.S. government. She's a brilliant lawyer, so I'm sure she made sure it was legal, but still, it's only legal because there's a loophole there. It's only legal because it shouldn't be legal, is what I'm saying. It really shouldn't. You shouldn't be able to. It's like using information you learned in the government to buy stocks. There's really no difference. So yeah, that's where we are right now. Now there's more. We need to talk more about Epstein's connection to Israel and how that ended up being another profitable thing for him. His Southern Trust Company ended up being, a fund for Barack's surveillance startup that Barack was starting, and they used Ariane de Rothschild to help. Like, it's very complicated, but that's where we are now. So I'm really interested to know what everybody thinks about what we talked about today. Are you starting to see everything rise to the surface? Are you starting to see all these disconnected pieces kind of rising? So they're like islands above the water, but underneath the water, they're all connected by land, and now they're rising and we can see how they're all connected. Let me know in the comments section. Make sure you like this video if you liked it. Share it if you think it's worth sharing. Subscribe if you haven't already, and we will be back with more. I will see you very, very soon. Until then, stay kind, stay beautiful, stay safe, and I'll see you next time. Bye.
Well, the levee don't break now, and the bottle's going straight down.